stories about water and urban places. This is Ideanthro.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro for another episode inspired by a recent inspections of stormwater treatment systems for Gold Coast City Council. Now, yesterday I was out just finishing up some of the very last of these inspections. Now, it's yesterday in my world. By the time you're seeing this, this is actually some weeks ago. But yesterday I was out at some sites and I saw something that clarified something for me. Something that I had wanted to be able to articulate in the past, but had never really been able to get out. So here's the thing. At multiple times throughout the past, well, I suppose it's 9 years now, people have said to me things along the lines of, oh, these stormwater treatment systems, we're going to talk about bioretention because we always talk about bioretention. These bioretention systems, they're so unpredictable. They're not like, say, roads or any other sort of asset where, like, we've got a pretty good grip on what happens. Like, if this happens, then that happens. And if this happens, then that happens. These bioretention systems, they're fundamentally really unpredictable, and that makes them really hard to manage. And that statement, I've heard that multiple times over the years. I heard it again quite recently. It's been a little while since I heard it, but I heard it again quite recently. And every time I hear it, it grates at me because it didn't fit with my experience. My experience has been, over the course of the 9 years that I've been following these systems and looking at these systems, that as I've got to see more and more and more of them, I was starting to see patterns emerge and could actually get a pretty good handle on, look, if that's happening to it, it's going to look like this. But I never really had the evidence to really just lay something down on the table and be like, look, they're not that unpredictable. But yesterday, I went out to inspect some bioretention systems. I was inspecting some and I came across this particular development. It's got a riparian corridor through the center of it, and there's little bioretention systems of maybe a couple of hundred square meters at most on either side. There, if I remember correctly, are 5 on either side of the riparian area. And I started on one side and got to this particular system and I was like, oh, that's not in particularly good condition. It had some certain faults, some certain problems of it. Here is a photograph of it. Anyway, I went and scored it. I was like, okay, fair enough, that's that. And I walked to the next system. I was like, wow, did I actually walk to the next system? Because this was, not exactly the same shape, but cookie cutter each of the individual elements, the plant health and how the plants looked, the inlet and how much sediment was in it, and whether or not there was ponding water in it, the filter media type, what was going on the batters, every individual element of it just looks like I could have substituted one photograph of the first system for a photograph of the second system. You borderline couldn't have told. If I sent you out and let you inspect all of these systems and then took you back in the office and showed you photographs of them and told you to pick which one was which, borderline you couldn't do it. Because unless you were looking in the background and maybe picking out street signs or something like that, the individual elements of these systems were so similar. So anyway, I scored that system and I walked into the next and went, holy mackerel, that one's identical as well. And I went right down the first side, all 5 of these systems. They just had the same typology, the same, like everything. Obviously not identical because they weren't all the same shape and they weren't all the same system, but all the individual components were just so similar. And the reason for this is really simple. They're all part of the same development. They've all been built at the same time. They've all been managed in the same way. They've all had the same type of filter media put in. The same landscape has done it. The same landscape has come back recently and planted overly immature plants in it to try and fix them up. They've all had the same fundamental life. Even though they're all slightly different shapes and at the end of slightly different streets, they've all had fundamentally the same life, so they look fundamentally the same. And this proves my point, is that bioretention isn't unpredictable. It's entirely predictable, except that unlike a road, there's a heck of a lot more variables involved in a bioretention system. So a road is a relatively static, straight down the line. You can kind of put it in a box, and a road's kind of a road. There are different types of road, but there's less moving parts. There's no moving parts apart from the cars, but there's less variables involved with a road. So fundamentally, they are easier to predict. But the fact that a road is easier to predict than a bioretention system because it has less variables doesn't mean that a bioretention system's unpredictable. It just means that you need a lot more experience and a bunch more time around bioretention systems. And okay, that's a hindrance. That's not as good. I'd much prefer it was very easy to get to know these systems and to understand and to be able to predict them, because that would be very, very, very useful. But there's a difference between, okay, it takes a bit of effort to learn how to predict these systems, and no, fundamentally, they are actually totally unpredictable. Because one of them says, we should put in the effort and learn because this will be a really useful thing and help us to manage them. And the other one says, why bother? Why bother at all? If you can't predict them, why bother? They're just a nuisance to look after and predict. They're a headache. We're not going to be able to do it, so why bother? Why bother? Because they are predictable. They are, and these sites demonstrate it, because in this particular instance, where we had these 5 sites, where all the variables were held really steady and constant, we got really similar looking systems. Now, I don't normally like the term, the exception that proves the rule. But this is one of those situations, because normally I find it quite strange to, like, the exception doesn't prove the rule, the exception proves that there's things that are different to the rule that can happen. But in this case, we do have an exception proves the rule situation, because I mentioned that there were 10 bioretention systems here, and I've only talked about 5 so far. 5 down one side, 5 on the other. The thing is that the 5 on the first side that I went to are all, in their placement and everything that's going on, really, really similar. But on the other side, some slight variations are introduced, and then the systems start to vary a little bit too. So the first system that I went to on the other side, and this is the one that we'll talk about, because this is the one where the variations are most different. We don't need to draw this episode out. But the first system I went to on the other side isn't right beside the streetscape. It's still receiving runoff from fundamentally the same development. It was still built at the same time. It really looks like the same filter media and the same landscaping's been done in it. But this system is tucked away between the riparian area in the back of a house and some trees heading up to a road. So the point is, this has very different exposure. It's also on the other side of the waterway. So this one has a southern aspect. This one's sitting on the southern side of the waterway, so there's potentially some different sun getting in here. And we see a system where fundamentally we see many of the same types of struggles going on, but the plants are a little bit more established and doing a little bit well. So the exception that proves the rule here is that we've changed a few of the variables. The majority are still the same, but we've changed a few of the variables, and we've got ourselves a system where some of the outcome changed, but not all of it. It's not like we changed a couple of variables and the system went, poof, I am now completely different. It went, okay, you changed some variables, I'll change some outcomes in accordance with those. And this was really important for me. I want to show you one more example here, and this is from another site. This is from something I actually saw some weeks back in the condition inspections, but it didn't clue on to me how important this was. So this is 6 sites, sitting again beside a riparian area, again in a single development. Older this time, clearly got more history to them, but I want to just quickly flick up shots, one of each system, one after another here, for you to look at. I just want you to look at, again, how similar these systems look. And I'm not going to dig into complete detail and show you every inlet and every outlet and stuff to prove really some of the similarities there. But just to give you a cursory look, this is another 6 systems who've had another quite similar life and therefore look quite similar. You ready? Let's go. That was the 6th. Do you get what I'm saying here? Look completely different to the first site, but all 6 look reasonably quite similar to each other. There's some variation. They're older systems, so they've had more time for some of their differences to emerge from what is different between the systems, because we've got them on different sides. Some of them have more exposure, some of them have less, all sorts of different things going on. But again, can you see where we have systems that have fundamentally got some similarities in their histories, look fundamentally similar? And this is the point that we're getting across here. Bioretention systems are in fact really quite predictable. They're not some sort of mysterious, magical thing that's like, no, the past has no relationship to the present. No. Bioretention systems are entirely a product of the variables acting upon them and the variables within them. It's just that unlike a road or traditional civil infrastructure, there are more variables at play in natural systems. It's exactly the same with a forest or any other natural system. It would be like comparing a forest to the parkland and the grassy open areas that I'm in here now. The grass is entirely more predictable because the grass is just grass, whereas a forest is this complex ecosystem with multiple species, animals, all sorts of stuff going on. So we can predict bioretention systems. It just takes more experience and longer to get to know them and to become in tune to those variables such that we can start to pick this and go, oh, okay, because that's happening, this will probably happen over here. It's just a matter of experience. And that should be a good news story, not a bad news story. As I said earlier, obviously we'd like it to be really simple variables, really easy to get to know and understand, because that would be the best situation. But if we're talking about a situation where, look, there's plenty of variables and it takes some time to get to know it and to understand it, and fundamentally they're unpredictable and we can't know them at all, I'll take the difficult to know and understand, because at least then we've got a chance. We just have to put the effort in to know. Okie dokie. That is my point. I will not labor this any further. As always, thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to know more about this, by all means, reach out, ask me a question. You can do that by finding us at www.ideanthro.com. I do not know why I said wwws. We do not need them. It's like http:// etc. Find us at ideanthro.com. You can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Insta, on LinkedIn, and on Twitter, although we use Insta and Twitter a little bit less than the others. Okay, thank you for tuning in. We will see you next time.
Before you go, our best episodes come from your questions. This knowledge base, these discussions that are Ideanthro improve with your contribution. So if there's a topic, an idea, a concept that you would like us to explore, come and ask us. You know where to find us. www.ideanthro.com/contact. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and that place you get your good podcasts from. You know where to find us. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you soon.